The War, the Only Hygiene of the World by F.T. Marinetti from What Futurism, 1911. And now I am obliged to tell you what it is that clearly distinguishes futurism from anarchism. The latter, denying the infinite principle of human evolution, brings its forward-looking viewpoint to a halt in the ideal of universal peace, a stupid paradise of people caressing in open fields or beneath billowing palm trees. We instead affirm that one of futurism's absolute principles is the continuous development and unending progress, both bodily and intellectual, of man. We think that the hypothesis of a friendly merging of peoples is an outmoded idea, or one that can be bettered, and we acknowledge only one form of hygiene for the world: war. The distant goal of anarchism, a tender affectionateness, is a sister of cowardice and seems to us a filthy cancer that announces the death throes of a people. Anarchists, moreover, are content with attacking the political, legal, and economic branches of the social tree. We want a great deal more. We want to tear up and burn its deepest roots, those which are planted in the very mind of man, and which are called a mania for order, desire for the least possible effort, fanatical adoration of the family, worry over fixed times for eating and sleeping, vile quietism, love for the old and the aged, for whatever is worn out or ill, horror in the face of the new, contempt for youth and rebellious minorities, the veneration and of time and the years which have accumulated, of dead and moribund people, the instinct for laws, chains, and obstacles, a horror of violence, the unknown and the new, a fear of total freedom. Have you ever attended a meeting of young revolutionaries or anarchists? Ah, well, there is no more disheartening spectacle. There you detect an urgent, irresistible mania in all those red souls, a desire promptly to divest themselves of their violent independence in order to hand over the leadership of their meeting to the oldest man among them, which is to say, the most opportunistic among them, or to the most prudent. In short, to the man who, since he's already acquired a little power and a little authority, will be fatally interested in preserving the status quo, calming down violence, and opposing every desire for adventure, risk, and heroism. This new president, while directing the general discussion with apparent impartiality, will slowly guide it sheep-like to his personal drinking trough. Do you revolutionary spirits still believe in the usefulness of meetings? In that case, you should content yourselves with selecting a simple director, or better, a regulator of discussion. Elect the youngest one among you, the least known and least important, and ensure that his task is limited to that of allowing absolutely equal time to all speakers, equality checked with watch in hand. But what creates a still deeper gulf between futurism and anarchism is the great problem of love, the great tyranny of sentimentalism and lust, which we want to liberate humanity from. Okay, so that concludes War, the World's Only Hygiene by F.T. Marinetti from Le Futurism. I'm here with Arjuna and CSD from the Syndicalist Papers blog. What did you guys think about that short article from Marinetti?
Certainly a unorthodox attack against anarchism, but people do make arguments like this. I actually employ similar arguments, as well as it's a pipe dream, but he's basically not attacking it from a intellectual sense. He's outright just attacking the emotional appeal of anarchism.
He's also attacking the end goal. Like, it would be fair to say that futurism is progressive in a similar way to Marxism and anarchism is.
Yes.
Unlike those two that believe in like that they're going to reach the end of history like a stateless, classless society, the futurists seem like they're interested in just a continuation of the struggle.
I mean, I don't think the futurists believed in an end of history.
Yeah, it's a complete rejection of that.
Yeah, and this also plays into their intellectual basis, which was with forms of idealism in Italy, because they did reject the end of history that Hegel pushed forward. It's one of the main distinctions between like Gentile and Hegel. And the futurists did borrow some of Gentile's intellectualism in terms of their grounding philosophy. It's why futurism went well with fascism.
That actually brings up something else too. It's actually very interesting to see how the futurists and the national syndicalists before fascism, to see how similar they are, but at the same time how different they are.
Yeah, there's some very stark distinctions.
Yeah, you can see similarities of that they're nationalistic, action orientated, but when it comes to fascism, when it got put into practice, it became more socially conservative and did not like complete the full revolution that the futurists wanted. And just to add on to the little bit of the conservative notion, in this article it talks about like getting rid of the family and all that, but the fascists in Italy promoted the family and people to have as many kids as possible.
So they're attacking, I don't think the family itself, but what he's attacking is the sentimentality of the family structure. Because, it's very, the traditional family model that the conservatives push forward is like, is rooted in agrarianism, fundamentally anti-modernist and anti-urbanist, which they despised, since, the futurists were all about progressing Italy. And
yeah.
Marinetti rejected love. He did not believe in love. So the sentimentality of the family structure necessity he doesn't really think is real, just thinks it's an instinct, and that's it.
He thought
I
like
know you
romance.
said
he thought that romance was like an invention of the poets that we needed to get over. He saw like the only practical use for relationships was to like prolong the species and keep the species going. He's very much like a social Darwinist, survival of the fittest type. So.
I know there like a futurist party at one point that advocated for like free love or something around those lines?
Yeah, they advocated for free love. Yeah. It was Marinetti's party.
Yeah, what were they called again?
The Futurist Political Party.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Marinetti actually wrote the original fascist manifesto with
it was with the Damies, right?
With Alceste Ambris, the same guy who co-wrote the Constitution of Fiume.
With Denise?
Yeah, which we covered earlier. The reason we haven't covered that one on the podcast yet is because it's very similar to the Constitution of Fiume. Maybe we will get into it at some point, but it covers a lot of the same ground as Fiume, so it's not at the top of the list right now. The original fascist manifesto by
I don't think I can find a copy of it anywhere.
I'm pretty sure it's on our plane.
Oh, it is? Okay.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure I saw it on there at one point. I'll probably send y'all a link.
Rex's article on the New Frontier blog. Rex's article on the New Frontier blog actually links to it. His recent one about like Italian fascism. So you can find it there.
Yes,
Maybe I'll link to that in the description of this video. But yeah, it's really short, and I think it does cover a lot of the same ground as the Constitution of Fiume. Alceste Ambris did co-write both of them, so there's a lot of overlap there. But anyway, War the Only Hygiene of the World. Yeah, it totally rejects utopianism of anarchism. I really like the line at the beginning of it. The latter, denying the infinite principle of human evolution, brings its forward-looking viewpoint to a halt in the ideal of universal peace, a stupid paradise of people caressing in open fields or beneath billowing palm trees. So like the way he describes anarchism is as like this utopian kind of like post-war kind of like
just calls it boring.
Yeah, it's boring.
This brings up something that I read from Schopenhauer, where he said if we ever reach this point, we just end up killing ourselves.
I think there's a lot of truth to that.
I mean, you see it now Like you see it how like since like we have so much wealth, how people just abuse that by getting fat or becoming alcoholics or druggies.
I actually saw a study where I forgot like the exact things being compared or the actual study itself, but it was something like compare two regions. One of them was like a developed, like safe, not a lot of crime. The other one is I think it was Northern Ireland during the whole like crisis with the IRA, and they compared suicide rates in these two areas, and like the Northern Ireland had significantly less suicide rates than this like developed haven.
Because
Yeah,
people actually do want struggle and obstacles to overcome. It gives their life meaning and something to work towards.
right, exactly.
And
And part of me actually
it was specifically male suicide as well. So
Yeah.
it's because they have no meaning to life. That's another thing too. Like modern liberal society doesn't really give people that much meaning instead of like pursuing your own pleasures, which gets kind of boring after a while and depressing.
Yeah, for sure.
futurists, I mean, they were about pursuing self pleasure, but it was within the framework of something larger as well.
Like in the name of the nation.
Yeah.
It's part
And
of
this
the
also goes into
warrior.
like the idealism too, since you are the state, the state is you, so your passions are the same as the state.
Yeah.
Which I
Not to
think the
mention,
futurists still
didn't
hold
they
on
like
to.
promote a form of collectivism? Couldn't we agree with that?
Which the futurists?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, it was collectivism in the same sense that fascism was. You regard the state, the collective, as the same as the individual. So any self-interest is not really self-interest, but it is at the same time. Since you are the state, but the state is also you. So you are an individual, but you as an individual are the state. So whatever you do is also in the pursuit of the state.
Right.
So it's like this very weird egocentric but collectivist framework. They just frame it differently. But yeah, it is focused on the state, the collective, the nation. They were ultra nationalist after all.
I think fascism in a way completed the futurists in a strange way where they added a bit more meaning to it. And you know how
Yeah,
they like
they formulated the philosophy more.
yeah, and also unlike the futurists, they want to preserve the history of like Italy as well. They wanted to idolize it too. While the futurists want to tear that stuff down and just look
I
completely to
wouldn't
the
say
future.
that's fascism itself. It was the social conservatives who were in the PNF who were empowered after 1921. So you could still be like a hardline futurist and a fascist. It just you frame it differently. Because it was
Right.
mostly like all the collaboration with the church, with the gentry, which Mussolini did, was after the. I think what was it like? What was the treaty called again?
Wasn't it the Vatican Treaty or Treaty
Yeah, I
of the
think
Vatican?
something like that. It was mainly because of that, since it was the early years of like the regime, and Mussolini already empowered the conservatives in 1919 because the futurists, because like the manifesto which D'Ambries and Marinetti wrote for their program, they didn't win the election, so this pissed off the higher ups in the party. So the conservatives use this as a chance to kind of sideline the futurists and the syndicalists, and it worked. So it kind of just went with a more conservative approach, which led to the treaty with the clergy. But yeah, this was just a political maneuver, not reflective of any fascist ideology.
Yeah,
Right.
like if you were a futurist in the fascist party, you were the more radical wing of the party.
Yeah, it's like how the Bolsheviks had moderates and more radicals. The same thing with
Yeah.
fascism. They were still all
Yeah.
Marxists.
Yeah. Like how you had the
I'll be right
Trotskyists, you had
back.
the Leninists, and all of that.
Yeah. Which, I want to get into that part of the article
Right back.
too. He's like criticizing the anarchists as attacking only the political, legal, and economic branches of the social tree. What
Oh,
we want is a great deal more. He says
he
he
wants
wants
to tear the tree down, not the branches.
exactly. He wants to tear it out from the roots, and plant something better than what came before him.
I think he also criticized the communists for the same thing too.
Yeah.
That wouldn't
like,
surprise me.
Their thing is that they want to like build off of capitalism and the old society, but Marinetti just wants to tear it all down as if it never existed in the first place.
Like to him, it almost comes off like futurism is a more radical form of anarchism. Like this was 1910, so there was no fascist party yet. Fascism wasn't a thing yet. I think at this point he did kind of identify futurism as like a more radical version of anarchism.
Yeah, like a militant anarchism, nationalist anarchism.
Yeah.
Because he didn't believe in like a utopian type of anarchism. He believed a type of anarchism where it's a war against all. Kind of like Hobbes' state of nature, but he's glorifying it instead of speaking against it.
Yeah.
I have a little personal theory. You know, like the differences between Marxism and anarchism, right? But they have the same end goals. Yeah. Part of me wonders if Marx actually never believed in the end goal, but just said that so that would be like the new myth that people would strive to be like.
Probably.
You know?
Maybe.
Because like I haven't read all of Marx, I haven't read Capital yet, but I've read like some of the other literature, and it seems like it becomes very vague on how they're going to get to communism around the end. They're very precise on how like capitalism came about, and they're a bit more precise on like how they will get to socialism. But once they start talking about communism, it's very vague.
No, keep in mind, Marx never distinguished socialism and communism. He never thought they were different. That's a misconception. He just used the word communism or socialism to refer to communism. There was no real distinction between the two. But when you go into like the dictatorship of the proletariat, he just says that it will wither away over the time, but he doesn't really mention how.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Like, I'm just saying how like most people think of it nowadays.
Yeah, that's because of like what happened in Russia was the Social Democrats distinguished between two phases of communism, just like Marx did. But they said the lower phase was socialism, and the higher phase was communism. But Marx never really distinguished that, so that's why you have people, they're confused about it now. This is like where a whole split up. You have people trying to like justify theories like, you know, Stalin shit, which I'd argue is a revision of Marxism. But it's just a whole mess because of the Social Democrats in London who created a distinction. But yeah, when Marx talked about like the transition towards this socialist or communist society, he had like the dictatorship of the proletariat, and not many people know this, but his like dictatorship was very, very decentralized. Like, he called for abolishing the standing army, the police, the bureaucracy, and everything. He just said that over time this would just wither away, but he didn't really say how, to my knowledge. I don't really think he ever elaborated on that. So it's still very vague.
When I read Engels on utopia and scientific socialism, he was also very vague on it as well.
I never read that book.
It's actually really good.
The only Engels that I read was parts of Anti-Düring, and I put it down because he strawmanned metaphysics so terribly. So I was like, yeah, no, I'm not going to read this. I'll probably get to reading it one day.
Yeah.
My favorite works by Engels and Marx is when they're, like, talking about, like, committing genocide. Those are the best ones.
I still have yet to find some of that, though. I know y'all talked about it a bit. All I can find is when Marx is on the AQ.
Oh, I could send you a lot. Give me a minute. I'll send you.
Okay. This will be fun reading at night.
Give me a second.
Yeah, so some of the
I'll send it to you later, but go on.
Yeah, some of the things he attacks about anarchism, a mania for order, desire for the least possible effort, fanatical adoration of the family, worry over fixed times for eating and sleeping, vile quietism, love for the old and the aged, for whatever is worn out or ill, horror in the face of the new, contempt for youth and rebellious minorities, the veneration of time and the years which have accumulated, of dead and moribund people, the instinct for laws, chains, and obstacles, a horror of violence, the unknown and the new, a fear of total freedom. Yeah, so what do you think about all that? Like, that doesn't sound like what people think of when they think of anarchists today. Most people associate it with like a glorification of violence and like total chaos and shit. Like,
It's just one of the numerous misconceptions when it comes to politics on numerous on ideologies.
I mean, anarchists are usually just pacifist, so they
Well,
usually
it kind of
a lot of them are.
there are different strains of
depends.
anarchism. Like, there's insurrectionary anarchism that is
Which is
definitely
very
not
militant.
that.
I think Marinetti would find himself agreeing with the insurrectionaries.
along with
Yeah,
the anarcho-syndicalists like Sorrell.
yeah, for
Yeah, but
sure.
Sorrell wasn't even an anarchist. He started off as one.
Yeah, I mean, like when he originally wrote Reflections on Violence, I'm pretty sure he was an anarchist, or at the very least a syndicalist. Which most of the time,
He always remained a syndicalist.
yeah. But like, what I'm trying to say is that most of the times when like the left refers to syndicalism, it's mostly put on the libertarian side of the spectrum.
Yeah, which is like not where it. The intellectual emphasis of syndicalism is not on libertarianism or anarchism; it's within the nationalists.
Yeah.
And the statists, like the anarchists are usually just like the people who just did some like shit with trade unions, but the actual theories were from the nationalists. And in Italy, it was the nationalists and the syndicalists who did it, who did most of the work.
Mm-hmm.
So and like in France too, you had like a clear disconnect between a lot of the actual syndicalists, like the nationalists, and then some more anarchist types because they did not agree with each other. Anyway, what else is there to this?
Next, he gets into the meetings of young revolutionaries and anarchists and how they'll usually elect like the oldest among them to lead the conversation. And he thinks this is wrong because the oldest, let's see, he's already acquired a little power and a little authority. He'll be fatally interested in preserving the status quo, calming down violence, and opposing every desire for adventure, risk, and heroism. The new president, while directing the general discussion with apparent impartiality, will slowly guide its sheep-like to his personal drinking trough. And then he poses the question, do you revolutionary spirits still believe in the usefulness of meetings? I'd say that's pretty accurate. You know, it's definitely in keeping with the romanticization of like youth. That's like so central to futurism, glorification of like youth.
Yeah, it's very essential to it because the entire aesthetic is youth and war.
Yeah.
I'm back. What are we talking about?
The aesthetic of futurism.
The glorification of youth in particular, like in particular the part of the article where he talks about like meetings for young revolutionaries, how they'll elect the oldest among them, who's the most mature, I guess, but also kind of lacks the like the fire inside to be truly revolutionary and audacious. And
That's what you see with a lot of revolutions, is that it's mostly led by like people that are very young.
yeah.
I think there's like some upsides for like someone to be older because they may have a bit more knowledge, but at times you can see that they kind of like moderate their views, or they become like less efficient on acting upon their views.
Yeah. They become more like, I don't know, I guess it's just a human instinct, like, you know, they're more like aware of the consequences of their actions, so they're less willing to take risks. or, you know, to live dangerously. Whereas to the young, the arrogance of youth, like, you know, you think you're going to live forever. You're impervious to pain, like you welcome it even. You're more willing to take risks, more living to live dangerously, which I think is essential for revolutionary politics. Like you need that youthful energy, or you're just going to end up with a bunch of intellectuals like circle jerking all the time. That's counter revolutionary. It's not useful.
That's what you notice with a lot of the groups that went to form fascism. They criticize that a lot, especially amongst like people that we now know as like left communists and social democrats, like people who are reformists or people who just jerk off the theory all day.
Yeah, I mean, it's good to, like, I'm not counter signaling learning theory. I think we're all into that to a certain extent, but
yeah, but there's no point in learning theory if you're not going to try to implement it.
exactly, like your ideas have to manifest in action. Otherwise, you know, it's just a neat little idea you had, but it doesn't mean anything in real time in the real world. Like theory has to give way to action, or yeah, it's just, it exists in a vacuum. It's useless. Anything to add on youthfulness and its importance to revolutionary action?
Not really.
Yeah, I think we've already said it. It's kind of self-evident. In that case, you should content yourselves with selecting a simple director, or better, a regulator of this discussion. Elect the youngest one amongst you, the least known and least important, and ensure that his task is limited to that of allowing absolutely equal time to all speakers. Equality check with watch in hand. But what creates a still deeper gulf between futurism and anarchism is the great problem of love, the great tyranny of sentimentalism and lust, which we want to liberate humanity from. And he kind of elaborates on that in the next article from Le Futurism, Contempt for Women. And like he elaborates on what he means by contempt for women in in the original manifesto. But I want to give that its own episode, so I don't want to get into that too much on this podcast. So yeah, that concludes War, the Only Hygiene of the World. It's a really short article, so this will probably be a shorter episode of Futurism Forever. But does anyone have any like overall thoughts they would like to share on the text as a whole?
Nothing else.
No, I don't have anything else.
Okay, I guess we'll wrap it up then. And yeah, we will cover contempt for women on an upcoming podcast soon. There are some other things we might get to first, depending on how things go. But yeah, we'll put a bookmark in it there then, and see you guys again soon. Be speedy, live dangerously, all that good stuff, and yeah, salute.